Hey folks, thanks for clicking on the video. So I got an interesting one for you today. So, at the end of the year, most of us, what we do is we get ready to create that new budget for the next year. But to begin that process, you got to go back to the beginning of the year and look at the budget that you created back then. And then every quarter, at least for myself, every quarter, I balance that, right? I take a look at how well I'm tracking with that budget, make adjustments here and there. And then at the end of the year, I'd like to put it all together and kind of see if I was kind of on the money or, I fell outside of those boundaries. But one of the things I wanted to take a look at was not just for myself, but measure myself against the average person that's out there. What's the average income that people make? How much does the average person have saved for retirement? And what's the average return on that money? And then measure that against what I'm doing to see if I'm average, below average, or I'm above average. Am I tracking? Am I going the right direction? And so that's what we're going to do today. So, a lot of interesting things here. And if this interests you, stay with me, right? Let's review this together. And if you're not interested, just watch it anyway. You might learn something, might find something interesting there. So let's get started. So let's start by talking about Social Security. So I got my data from the Social Security Administration, and they say that the average Social Security check that goes out is roughly $1,976. $1,976. All right, so the average retirement accounts, right, the accounts that people save money for retirement, anybody, is roughly 144,000. Now that's everybody, right? That's just not those people that are in retirement. That's anybody prior to retirement. So I needed to drill down because I wanted to measure something more accurately, right? So I took those people that are 60 and above and try to find out how much they have saved. And roughly they said they have saved somewhere around $240,000. Yet I think that number is more accurate, right? $240,000. So the next thing I wanted to find out was you got $240,000 saved. What do people make yearly on that amount of money? Well, the average return is somewhere around 5 to 8%, right? More in the up market, less in the down market. Right now, the market's on fire. It's moved up a whole lot in 2025. So they're contemplating somewhere maybe 9, 10% this year. But I wanted to look at something that is more accurate. And so I'm looking at the historic number, right? The historic number is roughly 7%. So that's the number that I want to use. So what I did is I took your average monthly Social Security check, the 1976, multiply that by 12, so you get $23,712. So that's what an average person makes in Social Security annually. And I took the $240,000 and I multiplied that by 7%. And that gave me $16,800. So somebody with that amount of money, 7% annually, they make about $16,800. So I added those two up, and I have roughly $40,512. So on average, the average person out there, they have roughly $40,512 a year to get them by. Now you divide that by 12 if you want to find out what they're making monthly, and that's roughly $3,376, right? That's monthly. And so now I wanted to measure those numbers, measure that against what I am doing. So my Social Security is roughly $2,238, or roughly $26,856 a year. Now we don't pull from a 401 or a IRA or any type of retirement account because I got a pension, right? And so my military pension, my military retirement, it provides me with $3,731 a month, or roughly 44,783 a year. That's a good chunk of change, right? So I combine both of those, and that gives me roughly $71,639 a year. And the good thing about those two numbers, they don't go up or down. Oh, sometimes they go up with inflation, not inflation, but with the cost of living adjustments every year. Yeah, both of those will go up every year by very little. But we're going to talk more about what can pull that down more or maybe raise it up. All right, so next we're going to talk about the average cost. So the average cost for a typical person that is roughly 65 years old and retire is roughly about $64,000 a year or $5,300 a month. Now you see where there's an issue, right? There's a delta between the two. And what the average person makes is $3,376, but it costs the average person $5,300 to get by. That's why a lot of people are not retiring. They don't have enough money yet. But let's see where all these costs are coming from. All right, so they say that typically housing costs about 35% of that, right? So, and that's a typical, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath home that's costing you money. Now the hope is that you have that house paid for. If you have the house paid for, then it's a whole lot less than the 35%. Or maybe you decide to go RV, right? Get an RV and park it in a park, and that's where you live. RV is paid for. There's that cost. That cost is reduced, right? And there's a whole bunch of other ways to reduce that housing cost. Some people even move out of the country. Move to the Philippines. It's cheaper there. That's what they say. Then there's healthcare. That's about 15% of the cost. Now, with healthcare, the thing that you could do to lower that cost, stay healthy. Get out, walk, run, hike, bicycle, tricycle, anything you can do to stay healthy, keep you out of those doctor's offices, right? And those costs might be reduced. And then there's food. Food, it's about 15% of that cost. Want to reduce that? Stop eating. Yeah, it's hard to reduce that, especially when inflation is kicking in and the cost with all the foods in the grocery stores keep going up. So it's something to think about, right, when it comes to food. And then there's transportation. That's about 14%. 14% of what you make goes to transportation. Maybe you got 2 cars, you go down to 1 car. Maybe you sell both your cars. Use public transportation. Call an Uber if you have to go. I think about it, and we don't go very many places. We could probably do with Uber. And if you live in the city, everything's right around you. But if you live out of the country, well, you got to drive a long way to get a pizza. And then there's entertainment. Everybody likes to be entertained, and that's about 12% of our monies. Now, you want to reduce entertainment? Well, there are ways to do that, right? Might be the fishing trips that you like to do. It might be travel. Could be all the birthday presents you want to give your grandkids. But there's ways to reduce that, right? That's where the budget comes in. And then utilities. Utilities are about 8%, right? 8% of the cost come or go to utilities. And man, it's hard to manage those because inflation kicks in. Those utilities, for whatever reason, they go up. And we're talking, power, lights, air conditioner, heater, all those things that you need, that you really need to live. Or you can go get a cabin in the mountains and live off solar. If you can figure that out, yeah, that's another option. And so those are the key trends, right? We know that inflation makes all these numbers go up or go down. And we hope that our government can get this inflation tamed and cut the costs in the grocery stores. Let's see, what else is there? Um, well, everything starts out with a budget, and that's why I say, at the end of the year, you got to go back, look at your budget. You got to make some changes, and then based on those changes, 2026 comes, and you continue to live. You're not making enough money to cover all your costs. Some people go back to work. Some people change their lifestyles. Some people move. Just depends. But I thought that was real interesting as far as drilling down on some of these numbers to kind of see where I was. You could take some of these numbers and make a comparison with what you're doing. Feel free. That's not a problem. Yep. And I think my next step is to create my 2026 budget. Hey, I'll share that with everybody. So, one of the reasons to subscribe. And when I get that, I'll share it with everybody. This is Chandler's Retirement Live saying, be safe out there. Lights out.